It looks like we have another hailstorm starting here, so if it gets loud, I will maybe switch to headphones or something that might cancel a little more noise. So welcome everybody today. This is the Rock and Relationships webinar, and as I was thinking about a topic today, I've been systematically going through areas of conflict in relationships, and that just felt like it's not going to quite hit the mark today. Everybody I've been talking to over the last 3 weeks is really anxious to various degrees and trying to figure out what to do. So I wanted to talk about some aspects of relationships that I think are also, or some aspects of approaching things in relationships that I think is also just solid life advice. And so what we're talking about today, you can apply this on the personal level. You can apply this in your relationship. I think a lot of people around the country are now close quarters, either with someone that they're madly in love with and feel great around, or someone that they wish they could get some space from, and everywhere in between. So this advice can help with that as well. Also, a lot of people, your work has been disrupted, or heaven forbid for some of you, maybe even has ended for a while. And I think this advice also applies to dealing with economic uncertainty and trying to figure out how to continue to keep yourself afloat during really uncertain times. So let's dive in. The first principle that I'll talk about today is doing what you can. So the question for me comes up, how do I know that I'm doing what I can? And I think it's really important to distinguish between the cans and the shoulds. There's a never-ending list of what I should do, but the reality about any day is there's a finite amount of what I can do. And here are some of the ways that I feel like I am in the can-do zone. So first of all, when it comes to something I can do, nobody has to motivate me to do it. Nobody has to twist my arm, and I don't have to guilt myself into making it happen. If I can do something, my desire to do it, my ability to do it, and the opportunity to do it all align. So can is not just about what we individually can do, it's also what our circumstances allow us to do. Honestly, there's nothing that I would love more right now, or with all of my other sessions. I'd love to be face to face with people helping them, because I feel like there's a lot of calming and soothing that comes that way, but the circumstances are such that that's not a possibility right now. So it's okay that I can't do that. There's other things that I can do. When we're doing what we can do, it doesn't deplete us. Even if it's like really hard work to get some things done, doing what we can do energizes us. I'm part of the local trails committee in the town that I live in, and over the past few weeks, we've been dealing with graffiti on some of our favorite bouldering rocks. And so last Wednesday, I wasn't seeing clients, and my kids were home from school because nobody's going to school. And I thought, today I can take them and we can go clean graffiti off of rocks, and it'll be educational and fun for them, and good for the community. And it was 3.5 hours of really hard work in the rain. But I came home and I wasn't exhausted, and I wasn't able to not do anything the rest of the day. It was energizing to know that I did something that made a difference. And I did something that I was equipped to do, I knew how to do. So doing what you can doesn't deplete you. I think it's important right now that whether it comes to your relationships, whether it comes to your economic situation or your job, or even your personal health, all of us can agree right now that these are exceptional times. So dropping expectations temporarily is part of what opens up what we can do. I think for me right now, taking care of my physical body, moving and exercise, it's restricted more than it is normally. And I'm not holding myself to that standard of this is what should be happening. I think in homes around the country, tensions between partners are probably higher than they normally are because we're in a stressful situation, and and we're in close quarters in a stressful situation. So dropping the expectation for perfect harmony in the home, I think, is important right now, and giving each other a lot of forgiveness, and a lot of grace, for being snappy can help as well. Um, I've also noticed that when we drop expectations or temporarily, or we drop the bar for what we need, it actually opens up conversations and opportunities to handle the problem that is right here in front of us, instead of trying to create an ideal world, around us. And I think so much of how people are living and what they're needing right now, there's some pretty immediate problems that need some attention. And that's okay to pull back and focus on. When you do what you can, you're not active, and you're not overactive, and you're not passive. You're, again, right in that sweet spot. And what you do tends to, instead of diverting you away from feeling your anxiety, when we're actually doing what we can, we do things that matter and they actually make a difference. Um, so instead of trying to get a bunch of stuff done, what we're trying to do is do what matters. This takes me back to something I heard recently about hurricane survivors, particularly Katrina and the hurricane a couple of years ago in Houston. And with Katrina especially, it took FEMA and emergency responders a couple of days to get on the scene. And what they found when they got on the scene were actually a lot of communities pulling together, getting each other safe, getting shelter in place. And FEMA came on the scene and they said, everybody stop what you're doing, we'll take care of this. And then the insurance adjusters came in and said, any changes you're making to your property now will negate will nullify your insurance policy. So don't do anything to your dwelling right now until we assess damage and can figure out what we pay you for. So what that essentially did is it locked everybody down from taking action for a while, and incidences of looting and victim on victim violence increased. It's really important when we're in stressful situations to be able to respond in some way, especially in ways that matter. And what I find with myself, if I'll stop and I'll listen to what's happening in my body, and I'll stop and listen to what's actually going on, instead of responding in panic, I usually respond in some kind of useful way. Or I have some kind of idea, well, I could do this and that would help. So that first point, do what you can. The second point, challenge yourself to stay with what's realistic. So in other words, try to let go of what you can't do. For many of you on this webinar, you may have a spouse who's in active addiction, or you may be in active addiction yourself. And with increased levels of stress and uncertainty, you may be using your addiction to cope, or your spouse may be using their addiction to cope. That's unfortunate. I also think that making that stop single-handedly, or making that stop overnight, may be that much harder right now. So resources like this and other places where you can stay in touch with your healthy coping, as imperfect as it might be, may be the best that you can do right now. And I think for a lot of people, when it comes to how they want their family to run, how they want their work to go, their business to run, how they want their relationship with their spouse to be, there's a lot of other factors affecting that. And it's okay to surrender some of that for the time being. Again, doing what you can, but making sure you focus on what's important. For many people right now, my parents are not an example of this. It's kind of funny. For many people right now, they're not able to interact socially with the way that they like. I talked to my parents the other morning, and they said, this really isn't impacting us because we don't ever really go out, and we don't ever really see people. So it's life as usual for us. But for many people, it's not feeling that way. They're not happy to be staying at home or limiting social contact. Um, so when we're able to accept what is instead of trying to push limits and boundaries to make the world conform to what we want, we actually find opportunities that we may not have before. There are friends and there are people that I'm talking with on a regular basis now that I haven't picked up the phone to call in years. And there's something about what's going on now that is, for me at least, it's folding me back into a community that is important to me. Um, and it's been really important to pause and to recognize this is different, and these other avenues open up. This reminds me of a time when I was a backcountry guide in Yellowstone and Teton for a few years, and the name of the game in safety there was not making sure everybody had water. Water was everywhere. It was making sure that people didn't keep food on their person or in their tents at night because it was bear country. And so I would stress over and over again with my groups at night, the tradition was we'd put all of the smelly stuff in a sack and we would run it up a tree or hang it in a tree or hang it in a bear pole overnight so that bears couldn't get to it. And every night I was assured by everybody, oh yeah, we brought everything that we have here. And one night with this particular group, it was our last night on the trail, and we were a couple miles away from one of my favorite hot springs in the Yellowstone backcountry. And I told the group, hey, we made good time today. If we hurry, we can get to the hot spring, spend a couple hours and be back before dark, and we can have dinner then. And everybody thought that was great. So we all got ready to go. And of course I give the reminder again, everybody put your smelly stuff in the bear bag. We're going to put it on the bear pole. And so, everybody throws their stuff in, we get it up, and we literally start running down the trail. And about 100 yards away from our camp, we had to ford a small stream. And so, I forded the stream, and I was kind of looking back, making sure everyone was getting across safely. And then I turned and I kept running, and I heard grunting. And I looked up, and there was a juvenile black bear about 15 feet away from me on the trail, staring at me and starting to come up on its hind legs. And so I started backing up down the trail and, getting quiet and trying not to scare the bear into action. And I told my group, there's a bear up there, we're going back to camp, because I couldn't tell if the bear would be with its mother or not. So I didn't want to risk it. So we went back to camp, and all of the youth, all the boys that I was with, many of them broke into tears, and they were saying, I've been hiding candy in my tent this whole time, and there's food in my tent, and like, are we gonna die tonight? And I laughed about it in the moment, and everybody brought all of their stuff together. And the group went through and they said, here's what I've been hiding. And we actually took inventory of all this really delicious food we didn't know was at our disposal. And so that night, after we ate our like dehydrated food, we made like these candy and beef jerky, and like it was almost like the Great British Baking Show. We were making all of these like confections out of the stuff that was available to us. And that opportunity came from accepting the situation as it was. We actually had the bear pop up across the stream from our camp while we were eating dinner. Only this time we didn't run up on it. And so we were able to scare it away with noise, and, everybody was safe. But there was an opportunity for connection and an opportunity for fun that I'll never forget, that came because we had to change plans by accepting the reality for what it was. So the third point, and then we'll open this up to questions, is take good care of yourself. When it comes to self-care, I think the basics can't be overstressed, and they make a big difference for how we feel in relationships. So I have two kids, a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and personal hygiene is not the top of their list. And so I told them a couple weeks ago, we're instituting wartime measures, and that means without exception, you two shower every day. What that's turned into is long, luxurious bubble baths, which is great. It's relaxing for them. But, they'll ask me about every day, why is this so important? I said, number one, it can help keep germs down and off of your body. And number two, I think when you're clean, you feel better. And sure enough, that like cleaning their body on a regular basis, it's a touchstone for them. It's a way to do some calming and some soothing. So when it comes to self-care, are you showering? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you moving your body in some way? Are you consuming the right amount of information? Right now there is no lack of information out there about the virus, about the status of the pandemic. Some of it's good information, a lot of it's not. And I think whether it's good information or not, you can get to a point where you're so overwhelmed and saturated with information that you can't do anything. So the right amount of information is not nothing, so you don't feel bad, but it's also not so much so that you're paralyzed with inaction because you don't know what to do. I think when it comes to self-care, and I see this in relationships with couples who are healing from addiction, one or both parties will dive in and try to make themselves the world expert on the condition, which in some ways is really helpful. It's good to be informed. In other ways, too much information or too much information all at once can paralyze you from taking action. So we really want a balance between good information I can take action on. I think my connection dropped.
Yeah, you're back.
Back on? Okay. So we want to balance between good information we can take action on and being able to take action. So it's this back and forth. I think that's a critical part of self-care, especially when times are stressful. Make sure that you are cleaning up your internal talk and paying attention to it. You can't get through times of great stress, whether it's this current world situation or it's the recovery in your relationship and the recovery of your spouse and yourself. You can't get through it when your self-talk is critical and negative, and just focused on finding problems. So make sure you pay attention to your self-talk. There's always layers of self-criticism to work through. So pay attention to it and keep patiently watching for those layers of self-criticism. Seek to understand yourself, not to judge or criticize. I think now is a really good time to engage things like meditation and mindfulness, because it helps us get inside of ourselves and develop a functional relationship with ourselves from which we can have functional relationships with other people. So I'll just summarize really quick the 3 main points. Do what you can. Challenge yourself to stay in with what's realistic, or in other words, try to let go of what you can't do. And I have try in there on purpose. It's a process. That one's really hard to do. And number 3, take good care of yourself. Focus on the basics of self-care.
Thank you, John. That was actually spot on for today, I think. I found it very soothing just to kind of let that wash over me. So I think you and I are both having bad internet connection today. So everybody, please bear with us if
Okay.
we freeze. Please ask us questions about, sort of coping in close quarters, as a lot of people are doing, or anything else to do with addiction and recovery. I did want to mention, I liked your first point about doing what you can, because I think so many of us are focused really heavily on what we can't do right now, instead of what we can. I mean, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this. Oh, this is crazy. Are you seeing that? I mean, you're stuck at home like the rest of us, but I mean, are you seeing that, and are you having to combat that with kids? And I know you're probably seeing clients online.
Oh, yeah, I think with everybody right now, like, truth be told, last night I was in a pretty negative spiral, was feeling overwhelmed, and a lot of it was centered around, I'd like to be able to do this, I'd like to be able to do that. The start of this year has meant some really big changes for my practice that I got underway, and now I've had to walk away from all of them for the time being. And that was one of the things I was noticing last night was, the list of what I can't do was too big, and the list of limitations, it just felt like my arms were tight at every turn. And so fortunately, right now my spouse and I have been trading off with who's freaking out and who's unsettled. So she's calm, well I'm more on the side of not real calm right now. And that was her suggestion to me, as well, let's look at what we can do. What can we make happen? And we went through the whole list of not just what we could do, but what we have been doing. And that immediately was really calming for me. Instead of feeling restricted